Good evening. This is a meeting of the Lunenburg Athletic Advisory Committee. It is Tuesday, February 4th at 6 p.m., and this is a virtual meeting. To begin, I'm going to read the meeting notice. In accordance with the requirements of the open meeting law, please be advised that this meeting is being recorded and will be able to be found on the Lunenburg Access YouTube channel after the meeting. Remote viewing options are available on the agenda. The agenda lists all of the topics which may be discussed at the meeting and those reasonably anticipated by the chair. Votes may be taken at this meeting as a result of discussions. Note that not all items listed may be discussed, and items not listed may also be brought up for discussion to the extent permitted by the open meeting law. I am the school committee representative and chair of the Lunenburg Athletic Advisory Committee. My name is Peter Beardmore, and I'm calling this meeting to order. I am joined by Kevin Bigelow, who is the athletic director, and Dr. Susan Gilson, who is our director of finance, amongst other things. And she will be leading us through a brief presentation in a few minutes. The Athletic Advisory Committee is driven by school committee policy. It's basically enshrined in school committee policy, and it has a few purposes, one of which is to raise and discuss athletic-related issues related with our athletics program, and bring those issues back for consideration by administration and by the school committee, which is why Mr. Bigelow and myself are the permanently appointed members of this committee. Typically, our meetings are also attended by, and these are publicly posted meetings, and the public is welcome, but they are generally attended by leaders of booster clubs and officers of booster clubs. One of our remits is to approve fundraising that is happening in the schools, and to deal with any potential conflicts that may arise relative to fundraising events. Earlier this year, we agreed that we would not be meeting every season, but would rather be holding an annual meeting at the end of the summer to discuss issues relating to athletics. For the upcoming year, we will be reaching out to booster clubs and to the sports teams through SportsU to make that meeting known and to welcome people. But we would also add, if you are a booster club president or officer, please make yourself known to the athletic director. Sometimes those clubs change and the leadership changes and rotates, and we would like to maintain a formal level of communication and continuity so that we can communicate any issues relating to the program, solicit your feedback through athletic advisory committee functions, and also ensure that fundraising programs are done within compliance. And we have a form that we ask booster clubs to fill out that explains what they're doing from a fundraising perspective, and typically we get those approved relatively quickly. So please do that if you are fall into that category. The main purpose of the discussion this evening is to discuss a proposal to increase athletic fees. And this is a topic that has been an ongoing topic of discussion at the school committee for some time now. It very much relates to budget challenges that we have experienced over the last year plus, and are certainly about to experience in spades over the next several weeks. There will be a budget proposal made tomorrow night at tomorrow night's school committee meeting, which is at 6:30 tomorrow night, and I would invite everybody to attend. It is at Town Hall, I believe, tomorrow night, and there will be a Zoom component as well. But the purpose tonight is to really zero in on the proposed increase to athletic fees and the background for that. And I will turn this over to Dr. Gilson to explain what has been proposed, and then we will open the conversation to questions and comments. Again, the intention is to keep this informal but respectful. And I can assure you that, again, this meeting is being recorded. It's being made available to all of the school committee, and a summation of the comments will also be communicated to the school committee members. I would also just add one additional thing, which is we have a tight window for scheduling this evening. There's a varsity basketball game that is starting at 7 p.m. as well as a select board meeting. So we do need to stick the landing on this meeting tonight and keep it to 1 hour. I don't anticipate that that will be a problem, but I want to make everybody aware of that in advance. So with no further ado, Dr. Gilson, do you want to?
Can I interrupt for a second, Peter?
Yes, sure.
I think everybody on this call was on this call last Monday, except for possibly Scott. So maybe we could do a truncated version of this. I don't know.
I'll leave that to Dr. Gilson. This is being recorded and posted on YouTube, and I don't want to short chill anybody who might be watching on demand. But I appreciate the comment, Chris.
I do also appreciate the comment, Chris, and I did notice that the majority of people were on the call last week as well. So I am going to do my best to truncate. First of all, for those of you that don't know me, I am the Director of Administration and Finance. I have a high school senior who has been involved in athletics, and so I understand the parent perspective, and I also understand the school district overview in that we really are trying very hard. We have a very difficult challenge ahead. Most of all, our school budget priority is to ensure that we provide a quality education for every kid every day as part of the learning environment. However, that said, I really feel pleased with the fact that Lunenburg has been able to provide a quality athletics comprehensive program for all of the students. And so looking at the current situation, let's see, and I'm going to share the presentation so you can actually see it. So we're bringing that up. Can everybody see this presentation?
Not yet. There we go.
Okay, perfect.
Slightly delayed. Yep.
Excellent. All right. So basically, I am very pleased with the accomplishments of the Lunenburg sports teams directed by Athletic Director Kevin Bigelow. Since he's been here, the teams have all exhibited tremendous accomplishments, whether they're personal or they're team-based as part of the sports program. So I think we're very fortunate to have the opportunity to have it. As you know, as I described last week, parents collectively through user fees and actually fund about 25% of the total amount that is generated or goes into athletic program. So practices, for those of you who are parents, you know the value of the practices and you know the time commitments that the students put into the practices at both the high school level and the middle school level. And we know that we're grateful to the fact that user fees also offset the costs associated with running the sports programs. And looking at our current athletic fee structure, these are the fees for both high school and middle school. And we have worked on for several years a fee structure that provides a certain fee for the first student in the family, the second sibling, and the middle school also has a sibling discount, the third sibling, and then a reduced fee for high school, middle school students that are low income. And I know for most of you, if you have been on the Department of Education's website, you will notice if you look at the high school data, our low income rate has risen over the past few years, and it's approaching 25% of low income, which means that we are taking in a lesser amount of student fees. And we have been able to reasonably estimate how much percent is put together as part of the athletic budget. We've done our user fee comparisons, and we've zoomed in on fees that neighbor towns have. Ayer Shirley, last week I mentioned, and here it is, they have variable fees for different sports. Bromfield has only 3 sports that they're offering as far as we know it, and Groton Dunstable charges $600 per sport per season, and there's a $1,500 family cap for high school athletes. As Kevin has talked with coaches around, one of the things that we do advocate for in Lunenburg is to have an equity-based fee structure, and we settled, this is a proposal that we've settled in on, and the proposal takes a look, it took a look at the full sports season last year. The slide on the left features a table that shows all of the lines that go into funding the athletic events, such as the athletic director's salary, the athletic trainer, a unified sports coach, transportation, athletic insurance, dues and fees, equipment and reconditioning, replacement of uniforms, and new equipment. So that entire side was fully expended, and we count on something called a revolving budget. The athletic budget is used to offset additional costs. The challenge of our revolving budget is the revenue or the money going in is not equaling the expenses that need to go out. And so we are really wanting to continue to provide for a comprehensive sports experience, but we are really faced with a need to really look at what we need to do to bring in user fees that offset athletic expenses. And again, to keep them the same, keep the fees the same is really not an option any longer, because we have rising costs in transportation. Coaching stipends have risen. This year they rose 2.5%. Next year, the coaching stipends are going to raise 4%. And we also have the MIAA recommending fee increases for officials also. So we kind of took a look at what it costs to run the total athletic program, and that was for FY24, because we were able to use the numbers to actually put out across a full sports season and make some reasonable approximations. So if we are continuing, basically these are the same challenges that we've seen, and the cost increases are only going to get greater. And so we're in a dilemma where for everything across our budget, the costs are increasing, and we need to be able to, again, first priority is to provide a very comprehensive education program to our kids every day for all kids. And then our next priority is really to keep the sports program comprehensive, so that you have your kids that can continue to achieve in areas of sports that they excel. So this is a proposal, and the proposal is very much at this point still open to discussion. And again, we have looked at most of the nearby towns and really zoomed in on Ayer Shirley, Groton Dunstable, and Bromfield. And so we're looking at proposed fees for the first student in the family at $325 per season, and then discounts in accordance with that. Our family cap really is going to extend grade 6 through grade 12. So we're hoping that that may be a savings to some families, and we really hope that we will still get the number of students participating. So again, costs are increasing. I know most of you were on the call last week, and you provided us with some very rich ideas and suggestions. And so, so that's basically, it's our continued thought. We're going to hear from everyone. It's how do we continue to support the fine athletic program that we have when you have rising costs for transportation, coaching, stipends, and officials, as well as athletic equipment and other services. So I guess I would open up the floor. Mr. Beardmore is available for questions, as is Mr. Bigelow, and I am very open to hearing your suggestions and ideas as well. Thank you.
Now I'm unmuted. Thank you very much, Dr. Gilson. Appreciate your brevity tonight. And with that, I will open the floor. Please use the raise hand feature to identify yourself as wishing to ask a question or make a comment. TJ.
Hey, TJ here. Can you guys hear me okay?
Indeed.
Awesome. TJ Laughlin, 207 Rolling Acres Road. Driving, so not going to go on video. So I'm curious, I didn't catch this last time, but it made me think this time is, it seems the big reason or justification or whatever you may call it to increase the fees is an increase in expense. And then I think Dr. Gilson said next year there's a 4% increase on one of the line items. Is this going to be expected, I guess, year over year to kind of adjust user fees as expenses come in? Or is there a long-term plan? Is this a one-year plan, or how do we plan on thinking about that?
That's a great question. Dr. Gilson, I'll let you take a swing at this, but it did come up in a recent school committee meeting, I think perhaps in relation to this proposal, but do you want to take a swing at that? You're muted. Still muted. Bottom left.
Yes,
There.
got it. Woohoo. All right. To be fair, TJ, we're trying to invest and be responsible. And so as we make a recommendation for user fees, we also take into account that we're going to need to review this annually to make sure that our recommendations are on target. And so, like, ideally, I see as funding 26% of the athletic program. But you're weighing in, you're trying to prioritize high quality education for every kid every day. And you're trying also to maintain a comprehensive sports program. So on all fairness to, everybody in the public, I feel like we're going to need to present each year to show what our successes were in bringing in user fees, the amounts, and then basically presenting to the public, because our goal really is to not maintain a stockpile in the athletic revolving account. The basic goal each year is to zero it down and to afford to support the program in the way that it deserves to be supported, and be responsible yet realistic about the needs of our school budget challenges.
So let me offer my 2 cents on this. I think that what I would like to see is the school committee putting together a policy or guidance for administration for reviewing these revolving account driven functions, and some sort of formula or guidelines whereby adjustments could or should be made. And this is not limited to the athletic athletic revolving account. We have other revolving accounts that are in similar circumstances, although certainly not precisely, but similar circumstances. And I would ideally, if we could make it somewhat formula driven, meaning not necessarily a direct line from year to year costs, but some sort of, level of tolerance or elasticity that says if the account is trending, X number of dollars or X percentage out of sync, then an adjustment needs to be made or something along those lines. That thought has not been fully developed. And I think that it could be done in association with this decision, or it could be deferred until after we make this decision, get the account healthy, and then figure out how we're going to do it from year to year. So I think that that's a question that's worth discussion by the school committee in terms of, can we programatize this? I'd like to see us go that route personally.
Understood. Thanks. I just want to make another observation, and then I'll give the floor. I think that was the first time I had heard across many meetings, school committee meetings or otherwise, where, and I'm not even saying I disagree, just an observation, where academics was listed as priority one and athletics was listed as a clear second priority. I do find that as an interesting statement. Maybe not worth discussion. It's just the first time I had heard it. Thanks.
Yeah, I think that there have been a number of documents and conversations that we've had over the course of the last several years, where we have set priorities and direction, where student performance has consistently been the first thing. And student performance is usually something that is within the context of academics and measurable performance in the way of standardized testing like MCAS, and how we go about reading and analyzing that performance. So that I can tell you, as somebody who's been on the school committee now for approaching 3 years, that we've pretty consistently put academics and student performance as the top priority.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Please use the raise hand. If you can't find the raise hand button, which has happened in the past, turn on your camera or unmute yourself and make yourself known. Or use the applause signal. Chris.
I'm sorry, I thought that was the raised hand.
No, I'll take the applause. It's all
Oh,
good. It's all
it
good.
was one click down on the mouse. Sorry about that. I just want to know, I know last week we had talked about, and I know several of the people that were on the call last week had asked if we could ever get a breakdown of what sports cost what, so we could make a better decision. I didn't know if anybody had taken that into account, or if anybody was going to look into doing that, or if that's just something that's just not going to get done.
Kevin, you want to take that?
So I think, yeah, so last week we talked about, I mean, I do have those numbers, but I thought that when we left this meeting, we had talked about not wanting to release those numbers just for, didn't want to develop any animosity between the different groups. So I don't know if that's something that I have that information.
Yeah, I would, Kevin, I'm going to, it's a good question and not one that I actually rotated on, because I didn't think that those numbers were readily available. Now that I know that they are, I think that, in the interest of transparency, we can certainly make them available, but I do think that needs to be done by, act of either the superintendent or the school committee. So we can take that up. And I do have some reservations for exactly the reasons that you stated.
Well, I mean, I know you guys say that, but I mean, I was discussing this with some other people, and the first question was, is it fair that people who play one sport that doesn't require equipment have to pay the same as people who play another sport that requires equipment? It's just the disparity. I mean, like I said last week, 30% jump is a big jump in a year. Can I afford to do it? Yes, of course I can. If my daughter wants to play sports, I'm gonna figure out a way to get the money. I have, after this year, I have 6 months or whatever to figure it out. But or 6 or 8 months to figure it out. But some people, this type of a jump is a hard jump for some people. And so what you're going to do is, in my opinion, is you're going to have the people like me who can afford it. Their kids will play sports, and you can have the people who are on reduced lunch and waivers who can play sports for free or for reduced prices, play sports. You're hurting the people that are in the middle. There's people that won't qualify for reduced lunch, and there's people that won't qualify for free lunch, and they're going to have a hard time affording that 30% jump. Those are the ones that are going to get hurt. So either what I'm afraid is going to happen is those people are either going to stop playing sports, which is then going to cause another issue where we don't have enough money in the rotating fund because people aren't paying into it, or those people are going to somehow start qualifying for reduced lunch and free lunch. And then those of us who can afford it are going to have to take on an even bigger burden, which is just a never ending catch-22.
I appreciate your comments. I can tell you I definitively agree with the second half relative to the impact. My take on the first half relative to the cost of different sports, I just have a different point of view. I think that what you're suggesting to leads to reducing the cost of one sport, inflating the cost of another sport. It is not the athlete's fault nor the parent's fault that one sport is more expensive than the other. These are the sports that the Lunenburg School District has chosen to support and run. And what you just described, if you were to say reduce the cost for cross country and increase the cost proportionately for football or hockey, it has a magnifying effect on exactly the conditions that you just described for the athletes in that sport. So your kid's a runner, my kid's a football player, I get to pay more, and that becomes a never ending winless argument as well. So maybe we need to have fewer sports. I'm certainly open to that discussion, as I've said publicly previously. But I am very sensitive to the equity issue here that you're leading to. But I think that this is good fodder for conversation. I think that it's absolutely worth discussion. All right. I think somebody else tried to raise their hand and I missed it. Stephanie, did you have a comment? You turned on your camera, so okay. You're muted.
Sorry about that. It was everything. The buttons are not working tonight. Sorry.
I apologize. Yeah.
Steph Quinn. I live at 150 Houghton's Mill Road. And I have a son who is playing a couple different sports at the high school. I appreciate the conversation. And I just had a question about the data collection and the data for transparency that was on the last portion of Dr. Gelson's slide. What type of data will be released? So for example, and back to Chris's point, the idea that we may see our numbers drop in terms of participation. So do we have these numbers from the last couple of years of participation? So at least we have that as a baseline to look at in comparison to whatever may happen going forward. And then are there other mechanisms that we can institute in order to help students who kind of close that gap, that equity gap that we're concerned about, right? So so we know that there's going to be some families that likely can't do it, or maybe the kid drops from 2 or 3 sports down to 1. They make that
Yep.
choice based on that information. So are there data first that we're going to all be able to see in terms of how those numbers are shifting from the last 3 years, 2 or 3 years, and then going forward as we make these adjustments? But then also other mechanisms that we may be able to put in place to kind of support. And I know that not everyone fills out the free lunch information, that even when they can qualify for it, not everybody's going to fill that out too. So then there's a portion of the population that we're kind of missing there. So I guess really, what's the data that's going to be shared?
Yeah.
And then what other mechanisms can we put in place in the community to kind of help fund that balance, right? It's just,
So let me kind of take these in reverse order relative
Yeah.
to the identification of the low income students. So my understanding is that the way that system works has evolved quite a bit since probably you and I were in school, and you had those long forms that everybody had to bring back and fill out and that sort of thing. Our systems now are largely driven and identified through state programs that families are on. And there is also a proactive element that the schools reach out to families that may qualify. So it isn't just a one directional function anymore. It is a bi-directional function that is somewhat proactive. I don't think it's perfect, but my understanding is that it's better designed than it may have been, certainly when I was in school. Relative to the numbers in participation and payment, we do have, I think, a couple of years of data on that. And I think we should absolutely run the analysis. If we institute this increase, we should be looking very carefully at this. I work in product marketing professionally and do product pricing exercises all the time. And, there's this whole thing of, sort of the elasticity of a price where, if you raise it 1%, you don't have the drop off. If you raise it 5%, you do. And it's different from product to product and market to market. And the level of how predictable that is a really tough thing to put a finger on. But we do have anecdotal information already that exactly the scenario that you described around going from 3 sports to 2 or not participating at all is a very real risk.
Thank you.
Okay, there's somebody with an iPad who does not have their name on it. So could you please identify yourself?
Sure. Anna Lockwood. I'm sorry about
Hey,
that.
Anna.
Hi. I have a couple questions. The first one, the last presentation Dr. Gilman gave, she said there was 666 students at the high school that participate in the sport. Is that correct? Is that the right number that I recall?
That sounds like it includes the junior high program.
Yeah, I'm going to just go back to the slides and flip through them. It is about that number. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
FY total participation is 616.
Okay.
Right, and the middle school was 198. So at most, if everybody was paying in full, at most we would bringing in $193,000 approximately. But what we really noticed from the revenue from FY24, the combined fees only brought in $133,000 approximately.
No,
Yes.
understood. And I guess the question that I had about that is how many students we have in the high school, more or less? Is it 1,600?
453 or something like
Yeah,
that.
Yes.
our total enrollment is just over 50.
It's like 452. I looked at it the other day.
Okay, no,
And
that's
I
good.
happen to remember it off the top of my head.
No, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
So my last question is the 616 students,
Mhm.
is that unique students?
No.
Or for example, if an athlete participates in, 3-season sports, that one person is counted 3 times on that 616.
That's the
Yeah,
case.
that's correct. Uh-huh.
Oh, it was an or question, so I'm not sure.
It's the latter, Anna. So
Yeah,
that
okay.
616 reflects students, student seasons, right? So
Gotcha.
my kid is a 3-season athlete, so he is 3 of that 616.
Okay. And do we know how many unique students participate on these on sports? And I'm thinking of data like we are talking about it. So anyway, I'm having a lot of thoughts about this, especially as we were talking about data. So I'm wondering, out of the 616, how many are unique students?
Kevin, do you know that number? I recall that we had it and it was in the 50% range, but I don't recall the exact number.
Yeah, I don't, I'm looking for it right now, but our participation each season, which goes along these same lines of not unique, is 40 to 47% each season, but unique numbers. Let me see if I can get a quick one for you. And I cannot. So I'll have to
Okay.
work on it.
All right. Yeah, and I wonder, it maybe a little more granular in data. If when we start analyzing how much the increase impacted the families, would it be families that would choose going from, 3 sports to 2 sports, and and just gives a different insight onto how families are managing, and I think that's an interesting versus dropping participation all the way. So I would be curious if we could get more or less the
Yeah,
percentage.
I'm sorry, our registration system isn't cooperating with me right now.
No, that's
Electronic.
okay.
If
No,
I
that's
get
all
it- If I get it while we're still on here, I will speak up.
okay. Thank you. That's all I had.
Thanks, Anna. Okay, is there anybody else, or we can wrap up? TJ.
I'm out of the car now. Let's see. There we go. Yeah, so I just had a question, probably at risk of asking a stupid question. What happens if we don't raise the prices?
That is a good question.
I will tell you that if you've already seen the budget presentation, TJ, I remember you being there like 2 weeks ago.
Yep.
We know that the town manager's budget number given to us was a projected increase of 2.66%. Okay, so that is basically that's like the equivalent. All costs are rising across everything, like the instructional cost, salaries of educators, salaries of coaches, busing is rising, so anything, we have to fit our budget in, all of our budget within a 2.66 increase over last year. That's not a lot. And we've been in really tough deliberations over the last couple of days, because it's going to be a huge challenge to the school district. We know that while we want to try to do the best we can for all the kids, we can't maintain our programs at those costs. We're just not keeping pace with the total inflation of everything. And even like beyond instructional, beyond athletics, the other thing that I have seen, I've been pinch hitting as facilities manager too. And so part of that,
Lucky.
I see all the bills that are coming in, but to keep everybody comfortable, the highest cost, the labor is rising for all the technicians, and HVAC, the climate control of your building, those are huge expenses. And so, you try to balance everything, and something's got to give, but it's very hard for us to make those decisions on what gives. So where we've tried to place our focus is, you know what? The parent contributions have funded at about 26%. It's brought in X amount of user fees. And so looking at funding, and again, this data is based on last fiscal year. We'll have a new set of data once this fiscal year is complete. But costs from last year to this year, they've risen at least 2.5% for all coaching salaries. And again, next year it's another 4%. So, and MIAA has also driven their costs up for officials. So, I hate to say, and even on the news tonight, I was watching the breaking news, and there is question about federal grant monies that support the programming in districts. There's a question about executive orders dismantling the Department of Education. So we don't really know what's going to happen. And if our grant fundings don't come in at the same amounts, then it's really going to decrease our ability to fund everything.
Yeah, I understand. I think, I'm also engaging Parks for the same reason. Parks is thinking about increasing the fees for our youth baseball, softball program, because
Sure.
we're the main user. So, and it kind of has the same general feeling of, we just need more money in town, and it's effectively, what levers does the leadership in town to bring in revenue? What levers do you all have? And these are the levers, right? Because I think that the real obvious answer to my question of what happens is, we either do something drastic about athletics, or we ask for the money to go into the operating budget on top of what we're already asking for, which is a hard ask too. So
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
so here's how I would think about it. Let's assume that we're able to offer the same level of athletic programming next year that we did this year. Let's just assume this for this moment, right? I can tell you, you are going to see proposals for very painful cuts at tomorrow night's school committee meeting.
Yep.
And it's because of that delta that Dr. Gilson outlined. If you make the assumption that we are going to run the same level of athletic programming and you don't increase these fees, then we have to make more cuts on the other side to compensate for the budget portion to run the same level of programming, right? So instead of cutting X number of staff, we have to cut X plus one or whatever it is. Those are the decisions that the administration and the school committee is going to be left with. Or we cut athletics, right? We cut something in the athletics program. It's really simple when you think about it that way, right? It's, you don't have the money, you got to backfill it from someplace else, but the options are they're ugly across the board. It's just, believe me, as I said last week, I'm a parent. I write these checks. Going to continue to write them for at least 2 more years, and I don't like it at all. But to your point about the levers, there's no levers. They're just so limited.
Well, I think that's where I keep going in every one of these conversations. And this is definitely a bigger comment, but maybe I'm channeling this energy through you all, is the town doesn't seem to have a lot of levers for revenue generation. And I'm not sure what we're putting in place to add more areas of revenue. I know the budget task force tried to review that, and I don't know how far they got. I mean, I don't see any plan to bring in more revenue from business or things like that. But if this is the problem we're going to keep facing, which is as the world adds more costs and we keep getting squeezed, we need some levers. And who's going to start applying that pressure that can make that happen, right? Because
those are
I
very
don't
good
think the
points.
families, either the taxpayers or the athletics families, are going to be able to make that happen over the next 5 years. I don't think mathematically that's possible.
Yeah, I agree with you. And, you know, I mean, to the extent we can, we are going to look at additional revenue opportunities. Somebody made the suggestion last week about, you know, opening the policy relative to sponsorships. I think that that's probably good fodder. We are working on a project right now that we need to address the athletic facility, the turf and field complex, the turf and track complex. We're looking to offset some of those costs through cellular towers and solar and those kinds of things. You know, all of those things need to be on the table because they're just, you're absolutely right. We have to do our part to also find additional revenue sources. And for whatever it's worth, we also need to pressure our legislators to do right by us, because they're not. Full stop.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm not seeing any other hands. Last chance. All right. Thank you, everybody. I will call an adjournment of this meeting, and we will bring your commentary back to the school committee and administration for additional consideration. I appreciate your thoughtfulness and the constructive and respectful conversation that we've had both tonight and last Monday as well. So thank you very much. Meeting is adjourned.
Come on down to basketball. Go Blue Knights.
Basketball game. Go.
Thanks.
See ya.
Good luck.
All right. Thanks,
Cheers.
everybody.